Africa has gold, diamonds, oil, cobalt, uranium, copper, fertile land, and enough natural wealth to make empires jealous. So why is Africa one of the poorest nations on the entire earth? Why does the richest continent in raw resources contain some of the poorest countries on earth? Because this story was never just about wealth, it was about who controlled it. And for more than a century, Africa's riches have been feeding everyone except Africa. It's not a story of a continent that failed. It's a story of a continent that was carved, drained, tapped, and then blamed for bleeding. And it all starts in Berlin in 1884. It should have been a red flag that there were a whole bunch of white Europeans discussing the future of Africa with any African leaders, but that's how it was done back in the day. I should tell you something, because in Chandler Lit Hall in Germany, European powers gathered around a map of Africa like gamblers around a poker table. Britain, France, Belgium, Germany, Portugal, Italy, all of them staring at a continent they barely control, dividing land they do not own, drawing borders through kingdoms, tribes, languages, trade routes, and other entire civilizations with rulers and ink. This in context for you, there were no free elections, no negotiations, and no consent from any African powers, just greed with paperwork and a map. However, this greed made a lot of sense once you consider what Africa actually has. Rubber in the Congo, gold in South Africa, cocoa in West Africa, cotton in Egypt, copper in Zambia, palm oil in Nigeria, and free human labor for them to extort everywhere across the continent. And once the lines were drawn, the extraction began. Not development, not partnership, extraction. Roads were built, but not to connect African economies. Railways were laid, but not to serve the people of Africa. They ran from mines to ports, from plantations to ships, from the interior to Europe. Everything was designed for one purpose: to take the wealth out of Africa as fast as possible, as cheaply as possible, and if millions suffered and died in the process, well, that was simply just the cost of doing business. Also, if you made it this far and you're still watching, please subscribe, and also let me know how I can make future videos better. However, trigger warning for the next part because it's going to get a little dark. Nowhere was European colonization more brutal than in the Congo in the late 1800s. King Leopold II of Belgium doesn't just colonize reason, he privatizes terror. The Congo Free State, they called it, but free from whom? Villagers were forced to collect rubber under impossible quotas, missed the target, and soldiers burned homes, took hostages, cut off hands. Men, women, and children in entire lands turned into a machine for European profit. Rubber flowed out, bodies piled up, and Europe got rich. This pattern repeated across the continent. South Africa, diamonds and gold created fortunes so massive they helped build modern finance. In Nigeria, oil would one day generate hundreds of billions. In the Congo, again, cobalt and coltan would become essential to the modern world. Your phone, your laptop, electric cars, data centers, batteries, the future itself runs through African soil. And yet the people that are from the land sitting on top of this treasure were rarely ever the ones cashing the checks. That's the first secret. Africa was never poor in value, it was poor in ownership and development. Then came the second wound, borders. Europe didn't divide Africa according to history, culture, language, or economic logic. They divided it according to imperial convenience. And when independence finally came in the mid-20th century, it came fast. Way too fast. Colonial powers had spent decades extracting wealth, but very little time building strong local institutions. They had not trained enough administrators, engineers, judges, financiers, or industrial planners. Why would they? Strong, self-sufficient African states were never the goal of their colonization. So when the colonizers left, many new nations inherited flags, anthems, and broken machinery. They had political independence, but not economic control, and the difference changed everything. Because now came the next empire, not always with armies, sometimes with loans, sometimes with trade deals, sometimes with corporations, sometimes with local strongmen backed by foreign money. Now, the old colonial game plan was pretty straightforward and was easy to read. However, the new modern game plan of how they took over Africa is a lot more interesting. Let's say, for example, a country discovers oil, and suddenly this should be the moment that changes everything for that country. School, roads, hospitals, industry, power, a middle class, a growing future. Well, often it didn't happen because the resource wealth can become a curse when these institutions are weak and outsiders are circling. For example, a nation rich in oil, gas, and minerals can become less stable, less democratic, and often more corrupt because too much money flows through the hands of too few. In the 1970s and 1980s, many African countries borrowed heavily. Some needed infrastructure, some were hit by oil shocks, some were ruled by men who treated state money like a personal wallet. And then global interest rates rose, commodity prices fell, and suddenly the bills came to due, and Africa was in a mountain of debt to Western nations. That's all I got for this video, folks. If you enjoyed it, make sure to drop me a follow, a like, a subscribe, everything else, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.